Good afternoon and welcome to Wake Up Later with Sonia Poulton and guests on this wonderful, glorious afternoon. It's 5 p.m. GMT, that's in the UK. And wherever you are, thank you for being here. Welcome. Absolutely appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining me for this midweek catch-up where a veritable smorgasbord, a rogues gallery are in the spotlight tonight. And regarding emails, I'm racing to catch up with my emails at the moment. And as one idea of how busy my inbox gets, since Saturday, I have received over 200 plus emails. So if I've not responded to your email, it could be that I haven't seen it. So bear with me. That said, I am unable to respond to every email, but I do my absolute best to pick up the information and work with it, either to invite on guests that perhaps you've suggested or topics that you'd like me to cover. So how are you all today in the comments? Wonderful to see you here alive and kicking. What's on Wake Up Later today? Well, our guests will be author Ian Davis. He'll be talking about the Dark Enlightenment and Trump's Gov Core Techne. It's based on a series of brilliant articles that Ian has written, and I cannot wait to hear what he has to say about it. And we are also going to be joined by Investigator Ashton, who's going to be talking to us about free energy. And many of you have requested that. So I'm answering your request. And what else is on Wake Up Later? I'm going to introduce a new feature, Thug Watch. And I'll be concentrating today on Barton and Fox and signal problems, leaked US defense fallout. Plus, good news, we've got an update on little Sophie, an Aesop anniversary, and the relevance in today's world. Thank you for being here. We do news differently. And you know why? Because some sod had to. And I'm that sod. How are you all? I hope you are well. Markson is baking bread here. You cannot beat the smell of freshly baked bread and fresh coffee, right? You can't. Two of my favorite smells ever. Right. First of all, let's kick off with some, it's not even good news. It's great news. Remember Mum Ashley Hughes, who joined us the other week, and she was talking about her 3-year-old daughter, Sophie. Sophie had sleep apnea. The NHS were failing to act. Her local MP failed to act. The health secretary failed to act. And so we at Wake Up took up the challenge of acting. And that includes you, our viewers. And we kicked the whole thing into gear. And well, we have great results. Oh, yes, we do. Ashley wrote to me. She wanted to thank everyone who got involved. And she said, Sophie had her operation. They said her tonsils and adenoids were enormous, but her airway is structurally good. So she's now been referred to respiratory next month, but her symptoms have improved by at least 70%. Just some symptoms still lingering, but we're over the moon with the improvement in her. And thank you again, Sonia. You really have made a difference to Sophie's life. No, you lot out there made a difference to Sophie's life. It's just quite amazing. So what actually happened was that some of you wrote to the health secretary, some of you wrote to Ashley's local MP, and one viewer actually put the information on LinkedIn where a private surgeon contacted Ashley, offered to do Sophie's operation for free. He then went on to organise the operation at Manchester's Children's Hospital. It was with a different surgeon so that they could do it sooner rather than later. And they had little Sophie booked in within 2 weeks. Honestly, you people are amazing. This is people power. This is really amazing. Yeah, Julianne, this is people power. This is what I want Wake Up to be about, as well as kicking the butts of reprobates. I want it to be about really good stuff like this, us coming together and helping people who are being ignored. That's a 3-year-old child. And you lot out there have just made her life expectations and possibilities that much brighter. I want to thank every one of you that got involved. Thank you so, so much. Has it renewed your faith in humanity, Stephen? It's beautiful, isn't it? Drumstick, it is good news for once, absolutely. And I thought I would start off with some good news because, well, you know, we're going to have to talk about other things that aren't always so great, but it's really amazing news. And I'm so incredibly chuffed that we were behind that. Really, I am. Right, Thug Watch, a new feature to highlight infiltrators who claim to be about truth, but are in fact thugs who we should keep a distance from. over the last couple of weeks on this show, I've mentioned a number of people, and I use them as examples of people who had used COVID and that period to infiltrate truth movements with their own deeply warped agendas. Two of these people that I've actually mentioned were actor and professional provocateur Laurence Fox and ex-footballer and professional thug Joey Barton. Well, yesterday was a bonus day. Oh, indeed it was. And for those of us who have not been taken in by this parent, I'm delighted to tell you that trash is finally being taken out. Oh, yes, indeed it is. So first of all, I want to look at Laurence Fox. Laurence Fox. Oh, why is that image just shot off the screen there? Let me try that again. There you go. Laurence Fox has been charged under Section 66A of the Sexual Offences Act 2003 by the Metropolitan Police for posting an upskirting image of media commentator Narinder Kaur. To the people saying those pictures were printed in newspapers, have you no shame? You are supporting the sexual humiliation of a woman, whether you like her or not. Since 2019, when the upskirting law came in, the law makes it a crime to intentionally share sexual images of someone without their consent with the intention of causing alarm, distress, humiliation, or for sexual gratification. If convicted, Fox faces up to 2 years in prison with the risk of being placed on the sex offenders register. And for Fox apologists, you'd be in uproar were it a Muslim or a black man, and if the alleged victim was white. But no, these warped people attack the alleged victim instead. Narinder Kaur, I should say, is no less of a gobshite than Fox is. But here's the difference between me and them. I find her obnoxious as well. But that doesn't stop me seeing when she has been attacked in a way that is both humiliating and degrading, an attack on women in general. The fact that people blame her for what she was wearing or not wearing is very telling. That's the level of thickness that supports Laurence Fox, and that includes far-right media commentators like Alison Pearson and Julia Hartley-Brewer. Fox will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on 24th of April, charged with the offence. It's a live case, so I will say no more. However, the next one is not a live case, but it involves another thug like Fox. Yes, there are real far-right supporters, not the kind imagined by Keir Starmer, but Fox and Joey Barton, for that is who I'm about to talk about, are it. Oh, yes, indeed, they are. So Joey Barton, former footballer, he was convicted yesterday of being a wife beater after kicking his wife in the head during a drunken row. Of course, he was spared jail because we do indeed live in a two-tier system where people can pay for a decent defence and they stand a better chance of avoiding the fate of the mere working classes. So what happened in June 2021? After consuming several bottles of wine, Barton attacked his wife Georgia and left her with a golf ball-sized lump on her head. In a tearful 999 call played to the court after the attack at the couple's southwest London home, Mrs. Barton said her husband just hit me in the house. She changed her mind in February 2022, wrote to the Crown Prosecution Service to say she no longer supported the case. The couple are still married, but last year the High Court decided Barton should still face trial. So he just had 2 days hearing at Westminster Magistrates Court and is now officially a wife beater. This is someone who regularly tweets morality judgments about people based on their sex, sexuality and race. And he, like two of his thug relatives who are also serving time, are nothing but lowlifes. The judge said wife Georgia lied in the witness box and said what she had said before wasn't true. And because Georgia was saying it was an accident, maybe she was desperate to remain married to him. Maybe she was frightened of him. Maybe she's under his control. Either way, the judge didn't believe her, and neither does anyone with any actual common sense. The Barton family are known thugs. Yes, they are indeed. Barton was handed a 12-week sentence, suspended for 2 years. He was also ordered to pay $2,183 in victim surcharge and prosecution costs within 7 days. Also, to be clear, boys, the government isn't targeting you. You're simply not important enough to be targeted by the government. Like the Tate brothers, you're all reprobates who are being pursued for being a problem to our society and not a moment before time. And just before we bring in our first guest, let me just take this off the screen. Anybody see this? Jenny wrote in. Thank you, Jenny. Jenny said, I just wanted to send you a picture of a strange thing that appeared in the sky above our house last night. Definitely got our street WhatsApp attention. Well, I think it's appeared obviously in the sky above a lot of people, because a lot of people have been contacting me, Jenny, and it's interesting. Jenny said, I believe the official narrative is some kind of flare of a SpaceX rocket. I just wondered what you thought of it. What does anybody think? SpaceX drumstick. Right, got you. Got you. Right, let us, without further ado, bring in our first guest, right? Let's not waste even a moment. Here he is, Ian Davis, investigative journalist and author. Wonderful to have you with us, Ian.
It's my pleasure, Sonia. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. So you have written, I mean, like an opus, frankly. And well, you have, though, haven't you? I mean, that's what we're dealing with here. You've written a series of articles about the technocracy, and it's absolutely fascinating. I was literally having to do constant checking. What does this mean? What does this mean? And I love that because I'm learning new things, and every day is a school day, Ian. So part one of your series looks at what is technocracy, kind of breaks the whole thing down. And part two looks at how the technocrats such as Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are shaping public policy. So please feel free, Ian. The floor is yours. Where would you like to start on telling us about the Dark Enlightenment and the MAGA GovCore technate?
Oh, well, thanks very much. I mean, I had to write it so that I could understand these terms myself because, the Dark Enlightenment is a philosophical idea that came out of Warwick University in the mid-90s, a place called the Cybernetics Culture Research Unit that was headed by a guy called Nick Land. And they basically proposed, the shortest way to explain it is a privatized government. So it's not government as we understand it. It's a different concept of, they wouldn't say it was the state. They call it GovCore. So literally the government corporation, or the government is a corporation. And their idea was that in order to achieve maximum efficiency and to ensure that society is run as efficiently as possible in order to cope with the inevitability of what they call the technological singularity, which is the point at which technological advancement becomes self-perpetuating, that it needed to be run by a CEO king, as monarchies of a kind of modern form of kind of feudal monarchies, feudalistic monarchies, where the various parts of the corporate realm, and they spoke about society being operated as a network of realms, would be run by sovereign corporations. So a sovereign corporation might have total command and control of one particular realm. Now, whether that would be geographical or whether that would be, a specific sector of industry or something like that, that would be run by the sovereign corporation, and the sovereign corporations would be overseen by an overarching body called GovCore, which would be a corporate structure with a CEO king ruling it.
It's a new world order, isn't it?
Yeah. And Peter Thiel's a big backer of this in the Peter Thiel of Palantir and the impact investor, and he's not the only one. There are lots of people that are on board with this idea, quite obviously. Perhaps another one is a guy called Mark Andreessen, who's the original kind of investor in Andreessen Horowitz, and has been sort of taken into the Trump administration as assisting Trump in picking his posts that Trump's appointed. Now, Andreessen has quite openly stated that he wrote something called the Techno Optimists Manifesto, in which he has quite openly stated that he uses the term "we" because we're talking about a network, I would say, of oligarchs. We're talking about an oligarch network. He says we are accelerationists. Well, that means that they're advocates of, I would suggest, the Dark Enlightenment. And they would call themselves neo-reactionaries as a result. An acceleration is a extreme form of aggressive investment capitalism, where you plow resources into a startup, and it's a startup. It's very, very much used for the startup of new tech. new tech industry, and certainly it's been used a lot in AI, and certainly a lot in the cryptocurrency space, especially with it. So it's about this throwing resources at projects to get them off the ground to see if they will work, and if they don't work, then you bin them very quickly and move on to the next thing.
And of course, why this is so prevalent and so important right now is because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump's inauguration was sort of a feast of these technocrats, wasn't it? These billionaire technocrats that were there. And you talk about that, and you talk about the oligarch class, which again is very interesting. And you talk about Elon Musk being a high profile advocate of the technocracy. So this is a group, a very small group of people, and they're all with the same aim, aren't they?
Yeah, no, they've definitely got their hands. They're in control of the Trump administration quite clearly, I would say. So technocracy, which certainly Musk is probably more famous for his kind of advocacy of technocracy, is slightly different. If you can think that the Dark Enlightenment and this notion of GovCore, this notion of privatized government, is like the philosophical kind of background, or the philosophical underpinning for what these people are trying to achieve and establish. And if you like, technocracy is the operating system by which they will run this future kind of feudal society that they've got in mind. So technocracy is very much about splitting society into what it calls a sequence of functions. So there's no such thing as society with technocracy. It's done away with. We have a social mechanism, and we are within it. Both in the Dark Enlightenment, we're considered to be technoplastic beings. In technocracy, we're human animals. And we are to be programmed. So there's a big crossover between the kind of theories underpinning and the kind of ideas underpinning the Dark Enlightenment, the neo-reactionary movement, and technocracy. They kind of gel very much together. So technocracy would see society, all nation states gone, all basically, things like the kind of administrative systems that we've got at the moment, in terms of local government and that kind of, they'd all be gone. We would live in grid referenced places with grid references, no names or any towns or anything like that. And the whole thing would be overseen as part of what they call a technate. So a technate would be a continental system of control. And that again, very much like GovCore, it would be run by the continental director, who would be like the CEO king of the technate. So again, you get this big crossover of kind of cross-pollination of ideas.
You also talk about the journey of Doge, obviously the sort of not a department that Elon Musk is obviously running, talking about cutting government waste, but you also talk about the journey of the Doge coin, right? And then you also further talk about how X is becoming, it will eventually be about money transference. And what was interesting there, Ian, was yesterday I got an advert on X saying, "Are you ready for X cash?" Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so X money, X cash, they're rolling out this idea of, they've already got the regulatory approval for doing it. So stable coins and cryptocurrency are very much tied into the Trump administration's view. Well, it would be, because the people that are pushing it are the Trump administration, right? So it's very much tied into how they envisage basically dealing with the US debt, because US foreign purchasers of US debt, particularly Japan and China, are not buying it. They're dumping it, not buying it. So that means that US interest rates are likely to go up considerably. Nobody wants to buy US debt, or the big purchasers of US debt don't want to buy it. So who's going to buy it? They needed an outlet. Well, stable coins have emerged. Companies like Tether have emerged precisely to absorb that debt. They're buying US treasuries, so they're shifting it. So there's a multi-layer grift going on here. They are shifting US debt into other cryptocurrency vehicles. They in the US they favor stable coins very much, so they're absorbing debt. So that enables the Ponzi scheme, the usury Ponzi scheme, to continue. So that's what they're doing in that regard. But also stable coins, such as it's not a stable coin. The Dogecoin was a meme coin, and it was started as a literal joke. Now, Musk, within the space of a few months, just by saying things, he wasn't even involved that much with meme coin. He, just by saying things, he took it from a joke, meaningless joke, to a market capitalization of $21 billion. And it's a literal joke. It was a cryptocurrency parody. So I think that was I haven't spoken about this so much in the piece, but it's pretty clear to me that was a social engineering project. They were seeing how they could manipulate markets just through making comments on social media.
Right.
So
exactly. They knew.
Yeah, they knew exactly what they were doing with it. Now, if we move forward now to the Trump administration, I think we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing comments being seeded into the narrative, which people react to, and the reaction to that is all funneling towards establishing what I would call GovCore techniques. The neo-reactionists would call it GovCore. The technocrats would call it a technate.
And I think what's interesting, obviously, in this very short period of time since Trump has been president this time around, all this like sheer volume of executive orders that have come out, and some of them have appeared very impressive, and they're very popularist, a lot of them, and they've appealed to people in that way. But you say they are all part of Project 2025. Explain.
Yeah, so Project 2025 was something that was set up by the Heritage Foundation, which is backed by people like the Koch brothers and stuff like that. And they put forward a 180-day program for an initial. It wasn't necessarily going to be Trump. It was a kind of Republican-aligned 180-day project for the new Republican administration. And it turned out to be Trump. I mean, Trump was very closely aligned with it, really, although he sort of distanced himself from it. I mean, there are plenty of people within the Trump administration that have been closely aligned with Project 2025. And, notably, one of the things about Project 2025 was it was supposed to be, and I think this is where we get this notion of this techno-populist that I speak about in the articles, is the idea is that it's anti-establishment somehow, that it's somehow against the oligarchy. They actually, speak out and say, well, that we can no longer tolerate the activity of the American elites.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So people kind of like jump on that and go, right, this is great. This is exactly what we need to get rid of. Unfortunately, Project 2025 is funded, supported, run, and controlled by American oligarchs. We are in such a weird place at the moment.
We're a weird place.
Yeah.
It was like the first time around, wasn't it, when we saw images of Trump in his gold lift and people were saying that he was like anti-authoritarian and against the elite establishment and everything. But I in this very short period of time, we can't hope to obviously cover the entirety of your pieces, but I'm just going to hit as many kind of headline parts as I humanly can. Of course, one thing that we hear a lot about is Palantir. This is all part of the same structure, isn't it?
Yeah, Palantir basically took over it's a CIA aligned funded partner that took over something called the Total Information Awareness Project. Palantir is very much deep state, as is Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, and the notion that these people are not aligned with the power structures that American Republican voters certainly voted against. That's why Trump was elected. What they've chosen is it couldn't be more, quote unquote, deep state than what they've got. What they've got is as deep as it gets.
Bait and switch, isn't it? This whole
Yeah.
idea that Elon Musk is there for freedom of speech. One of the reasons that I know we're both having a good old laugh at that. Literally, I haven't seen one of your tweets for ages. And I just saw it for the first time yesterday, where you're actually talking about kind of like the problem with Twitter/X. And it's terrible, as we know. There's, it's just absolutely ridiculous. They are the global elite. But one of the things that you said in the piece that gave me shivers was you said that they have been extra emboldened at the moment. Why is that? Is that
Well,
because of Trump?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think they they've got a winning formula because they can sort of present themselves as anti-establishment kind of mavericks by pushing forward the most horrendous kind of globalist agenda you could possibly. I mean, it is, as I said, it's a really bizarre situation that we and I think obviously we're talking about an American election and American politics, but I mean obviously that has a massive impact around the world,
Of course it does.
and I mean
It's America, for
yeah,
goodness sake.
exactly. So I mean we've got like the situation in Ukraine. What
I
have
was
we
just going to bring
where have we ended up? We've ended up basically with Ukraine being pretty much taken over by American corporations. American corporations pretty much own it now. Now, that is quite a remarkable outcome from a war with Russia.
But
So, I mean, it's not the first time that this kind of thing has happened. We saw it we saw it in the Second World War. We saw it in Yugoslavia, what used to be Yugoslavia. It's the same kind of balkanization, kind of land grab, corporate financial takeover that normally follows these kind of things.
But it's the perfect takeover for technocrats, isn't it? Because this is all about kind of like a digital reset in the Ukraine, isn't it? A lot of that of what is taking place.
Yeah, I mean, they use something called the Dear app, which is an everything app, which is what Musk wants to turn Twitter into. So it's an app where you do everything, a bit like WeChat in China.
Right.
So you do all your banking, you do all your document, like driving license, tax returns, everything, medical appointments, everything is done in one centralized app. Now in Ukraine, that's called Dear. Now the name for that in Ukraine is literally the digital state. That's what that's what it's called.
Mind blowing, mind blowing. You also answered some of my questions in this article. And one of them is this fascination that Trump appears to have, not only with the seizing of Gaza, but the seizing of Greenland. What's your explanation for that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, people sort of say, "Oh, Trump does this and Trump does that." I mean, my estimation, Trump doesn't make many decisions. In my view, I think he just does what he's told. And if we look at Greenland, Trump's got no interest in Greenland. I mean, the US has long had an interest in Greenland in terms of its strategic kind of position from a national defense perspective. It's long had that interest. But the real reason that Trump is talking about grabbing hold of Greenland is because the Thiel-backed oligarchs, the Thiel network of oligarchs, Thiel, Musk, Anderson, Sam Altman, people like that, they want to build what they call a freedom city, which is a GovCorp technique. It's a completely unregulated, oligarchs can do whatever they like zone.
What, like Epstein Island?
Similar, like undoubtedly, like a zone on Greenland called Praxis. That's why they want Greenland. They want to build one of these things on Greenland. So it's not does Trump? I doubt whether Trump even's aware of that. Probably not. He might be. I don't know.
No. I doubt he is, actually. I think he's really quite unaware of a lot of stuff, unless you're doing a bad portrait of him or saying something bad about him in a magazine, then he's all over it. But like world issues, he doesn't appear to be up on them very much. But you also mentioned Mark Carney. Mark Carney, of course, is the former governor of the Bank of England, now leading Canada. But you talk about the synthetic hegemonic currency. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, no, that came out of a discussion that he held at Jackson Hole in Wyoming shortly before not him, it was the G7 Bankers Summit. But his speech is always stuck in my mind for this notion of this synthetic hegemonic currency, which is, a global currency. That's what he's talking about. I mean, he was talking about it not being able to maintain the dollar as a global reserve currency because there were challenges. The renminbi and things like that were challenging the dollar, and we hear a lot about that happening. But the more you look into it, and I know, you know, and certainly when I looked at it at the time, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about the conflicts and the flow of supply chains and things like that, how that would affect the global monetary system. But now, as things have kind of progressed, personally, I think what we're seeing is the Bank for International Settlement are absolutely obsessed with this thing called interoperability. So that means that all kind of digital products, digital ID products and cryptocurrencies will be able to be exchanged seamlessly across borders instantaneously. Now, that is, if you think about it, if you can buy something in the US, or you could buy something in France using US dollars and the seller in France gets euros, you know, then that is interoperability of currency. At which point currency becomes kind of meaningless. It's just a digital transaction. And I think pretty much that is what they were getting at. And when you look at it again, that is what he was getting at Jackson Hole, this idea of this synthetic international monetary and financial system, all based on interoperable digital currencies.
Got you. And you say there are better alternatives to this top-down oligarch control. And in fact, you say we must be under no illusion that what is actually taking place represents the most oppressive and totalitarian system that we've had, really. I mean, that's literally what you're saying in this piece, right?
Oh yeah, it's beyond anything we've ever seen before in human history. There's a level of control, right? So this is potential, right? This doesn't mean it has to be,
right?
But the potential is for slavery, abject slavery, total control of all human behavior. And that is very much inbuilt into the system that they are creating. So I ask the question, if they're not intending to use it, why are they building it? Right. So, you know, but we don't have to accept that. We don't have to accept it. We can not easily, I'll rephrase that. We can reject it, but people have got to stop doing things like having their irises scanned at airports.
Right.
You know, people just get on a plane and I must get my irises scanned. No, you don't have to get your irises scanned.
Right.
There
no.
will come a day, probably, while we all say yes, that we will. But if enough of us say no, we won't. We'll always have the choice. So that's what that is exactly the kind of thing that we need to do. If anybody asks you for your digital ID, for your digital more details, I mean, something I say to people is do not disclose information. Don't disclose it. And if people ask of you information about you, ask them why they want it. What do you want it for?
That's right. We have to be more curious, don't we?
We certainly do.
We absolutely do. Listen, Ian, really appreciate you joining us today. The articles are absolutely tremendous. Truly, they are. I've already put a link in the description to them. People, don't stop watching to go and read. You can do that afterwards. Everybody, this is Ian Davis, author and investigative journalist, just the way we like them. Take good care of yourself, Ian. Lovely to see you today.
And you, Sonia, thanks for inviting me.
Great to have you with us. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Before we bring in our next guest, who is due in very, very shortly, I just want to look at this fallout from the Signal chat with American Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth, obviously VP J.D. Vance, the leading members of Trump's administration. It's fascinating stuff. It really is. The Atlantic editor, an Atlantic editor had been accidentally added to this Signal group. And what follows is just the most gobsmacking story, frankly. Jeff Goldberg, who is the Atlantic editor, said that on Tuesday, March the 11th, he received a connection request on Signal from a user identified as Michael Waltz. This was President Donald Trump's national security advisor. Signal, for those who don't know, it's an open source encrypted messaging service popular with journalists and others who seek more privacy. Anyway, Jeffrey Goldberg had been added to the group accidentally. 2 days later, he received a notice that he was to be included in a Signal chat group. It was called the Hootie PC small group. Wasn't sure if it was real, but noted that there were lots of emojis like muscles and fire and prayer, like every workplace. And like any workplace, accidents happen. But these were government officials talking about who they were going to bomb and when. But still, mistakes, even serious ones, happen. But it's also the atrocious responses from President Trump and Peter Hegseth that is problematic. Both of them chose ad hominem attacks on the man exposing the leak. Now, the editor of The Atlantic may indeed be a scumbag, which is what they've led us to believe, as they are claiming, but that is deflection. What he is reporting on is either true or it's not, and it's true because he's now released the messages, and the White House has, to a degree, been forced to admit them, although the press secretary, Caroline Levitt, is working hard for the money, trying to minimize what happened. They're interesting messages. It's absolutely apparent they've got no time for Europe, and J.D. Vance was the only one really to question Trump's instructions. All of this was taking place on people's phones, people who were tasked with the job of securing America, and they were sharing classified information on Signal. Now, whether they've broken the law or not is a whole other story. If considered a national defense information that they were giving out, there are provisions about the handling of it and to whom. And could this be gross negligence? This was the same law considered for Hillary Clinton and her email sharing. So I suspect this is a story that is going to develop over the next few days. Accidentally on purpose, says Crazy Bunny. I want to be joined by somebody who I consider to be very knowledgeable about a number of very interesting topics. So let's bring him in. Let's not wait another moment. Here he is, Ashton Forbes, investigator. How are you, Ashton?
Hey, Sonia, doing well. How are you?
Great to have you with us. So many of our viewers are interested in the idea of free energy, but is it just a myth, Ashton? And if it isn't, why aren't we using it?
Yeah, no, it's not a myth at all. And I think that there's a lot of good questions that I want to explore with you. People have this idea that free energy is something that is impossible, that it breaks the laws of physics because something can't come from nothing. And the first thing I would do is I would challenge all academics that have that argument that something can't come from nothing and say, well, then where did all the mass and the energy in the universe come from? Can something come from nothing only one time during the Big Bang, but never again? And the reason why I pose this question is because I want people to learn to think outside the box and challenge their preconceived notions. So the first thing I'll do is say that free energy is absolutely real. However, it's a misnomer. Truly, nothing in this world is actually free. Free energy is the same concept as solar or wind power. It's an alternative energy source that we're using. And ultimately, free energy is actually about efficiency. That's really what free energy is about. So I want people to stop thinking about like these videos that you'll see online where we have somebody where there's just this idea that you have no input, that you can just get this unlimited energy from nothing. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a situation where you can make some kind of mechanical device or mechanism that potentially does require some net input, but it gets more energy out than what it gets in. And when you look at it from this perspective, now the door to free energy becomes possible within the bounds of physics as we understand it.
What do we understand about energy as such? Because I watched a video that where you were talking and you said that energy is action. And I thought that's a really interesting way to describe it. Expand on that for me.
Yeah, and action is such a beautiful thought because ultimately energy is defined as the ability to do work. Okay, well, what is work? Work is just movement. That's just moving something. So when we're talking about energy, then it's actually got a very nebulous definition. What most people think of as energy is electricity. And did you know the person that developed the alternating three-phase current that we still use today, 2025, everybody's power, was Tesla? It was Tesla nearly 150 years ago developed alternating current. And all alternating current is spinning a copper coil through a magnetic field. That's it. Basically, all sources of power that we use today are essentially just spinning a copper coil through a magnetic field. And Tesla himself, in his 1891 lecture, 1891,
Phenomenal.
said that in the future, people would develop a way to harness energy, I'm paraphrasing, directly from ambient space all around us. And he truly believed that he could pull it off. And he was right. He called it radiant energy. This was way before we had developed quantum mechanics and where we're at now, where we've gone from this idea of radiant energy to all of the physicists that developed the foundations of physics as we understand it, essentially believing in something called the ether, which was the medium that we live in, to now in the year 2000s, realizing that these terms actually refer to what we call now 0 point energy, which is this, they call it quantum foam, virtual particles that exist. We know there's something in quote unquote empty space, and that empty space isn't actually empty. So when we're talking about free energy, what we're really talking about is what Tesla talked about, radiant energy. We're talking about harnessing and tapping into the fabric of space-time itself, because it harnesses energy, and not just a little amount. This is called the vacuum catastrophe. Quantum mechanics says the amount of energy in all around us is practically infinite. But general relativity, when we look around into outer space, we only see a small amount of energy. Ultimately, the answer is going to be that quantum mechanics is right. Just because we don't see something doesn't mean that it's not there. And if we can harness that energy, boom, we instantly have what we would call free energy. Enough unlimited energy at such a high rate of efficiency that all the power we use now becomes inconsequential.
So the video that I was watching, and so what I think some of the things that you were saying was that in order to be able to access that, we need a high voltage discharge through some form of conductor in order to be able to access that. Because the moment that I heard you say that, it became very real to me. It wasn't some idea that was floating around out here. It was like something that was tangible. So expand on that a little bit more. What do we need to achieve in order to be able to do it? And why has it been hidden from us?
Okay, so there's three main ways that I've determined in my research on how you can achieve this relatively easy. One is that a lot of the people that have developed magnetic-based devices or electromagnetic-based devices, they were legit. It turns out that you can actually, through resonance, through magnetism, electromagnetism, either using permanent magnets or electromagnets with the right resonance, with switches off and on, you can actually achieve over unity. And over unity is the efficiency where you get over more output than you're getting in. Now, to pull that off, it requires, first of all, an understanding of the physics we're talking about right now, which is extremely slim, and a high level of understanding of engineering and physics in general. So there are people that can do it, but they're few and far between. And anybody that tries to really commercialize it, that's where you're going to start, weird things are going to start happening in your life, probably, if you were to do that and be successful. So there's a lot of filters that you have to get to. Now, the other way that you could do it is potentially with a plasma. And the reason why I say this, turns out plasma is the big secret to free energy, big secret to the UFO phenomenon as well, is if we really think about what is energy and where is energy coming from, we go back to our basis, our fundamental, what is energy, where is it coming from? It's really just an asymmetry. Like, what is a battery? Battery provides energy. What is it? Well, it's a separation of charge, or a capacitor, a separation of charge. We have more positive charge up here than we have more negative charge down here. Because this exists, the current, the circuit that I connect to it will now flow with energy until this equalizes. And once this equalizes out, then it's considered out of energy, the battery, the capacitor, whatever it is. So at the end of the day, what are we really trying to do when we're trying to produce energy? We're trying to keep this thing open, this dipole open. This is something Tom Bearden spoke about. So if we can just keep this dipole open, we also have access to unlimited energy. The reason why I bring this up is because a plasma is a dipole that you're keeping open. Because in a plasma, what you're doing is you're taking let's say your hydrogen atom that I have right here. It's got one electron on it. And I take that electron and I force it to rip off of that hydrogen atom. Now I'm left with a positively charged ion that now does not have its electron, negatively charged, and one negatively charged electron separated from it. If I just turn this upside down like this, now I've got a battery or a capacitor. So I'm actually creating an electrical circuit with my plasma that I'm producing. This is why people call these plasma balls ball lightning because it's quite literally
Oh, I see.
a
Right.
ball of lightning.
Right. But
So-
that also, yes, sorry, go on. Yes.
Okay, so you can create a plasma, and now you've got an amorphous blob that's basically a circuit that's got a dipole that's potentially permanently open if you can stabilize it. So that's the second way, and I'll let you dive in on these. The third way, the last way, is a microchip. Is that when it comes to this vacuum energy, 0-point energy, you have to interact with it on the smallest possible scales. There's something called the Casimir effect. If you put two plates close together, it pushes out the wavelengths of 0-point energy on from being between them. So the closer you get them, the more powerful there's this pressure effect. So the nice thing about microchips is that's what we're trying to do with microchips. We're trying to get to the smallest, closest scales. So if you have the right design with the right metals and conductors, etc., you can potentially produce a microchip that can interact or harness this 0-point energy, because our material sciences has gotten to that point now.
So, but your point is that this whole idea, going back to what you said at the start, the whole idea that there is free energy is a bit of a myth these days, because apart from anything else, in order to be able to access it, we've got to create this structure, haven't we? This way of being able to access it in the first place. And so that in itself, but that still doesn't answer for me why it's still hidden. Because as you say, Tesla was talking about this stuff, right, late in the 1800s, okay? And yet we still don't appear to be any further forward with it. So why is that? That suggests to me that bigger powers, the powers that be, are hiding this from us. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, it's definitely what's happening. And then it's more of a question of how they're hiding it from us.
Yeah.
You know?
How and why?
Yeah, and that's one of the first questions that I actually, people always ask me about Stephen Greer, and I'd say his Lost Century documentary is a really good one if you want to watch to really understand the nuance of why. Part of the answer is that commercialization is different than inventing something. Is that sure, you figured something out, but now how are you going to commercialize it? Turn it into something where you can make money off of it. That's a completely different issue, especially when the government itself is putting up roadblocks to make that extremely difficult, where that at any moment they can hit you with a Invention Secrecy Act of 1951 subpoena and say, or whatever it is, and say, you have to stop doing what you're doing right now. What you're doing is now considered secret. And almost certainly that's why the Atomic Secrecy Act and Invention Secrecy Act were developed. The other thing I want to say is it's part of like, how did I figure this out?
Well, I just want to give people a little bit of background if they're not familiar with you, because obviously I came upon you because of your incredible research to do with the MH370, which incidentally is all back in the news again this week, which is very interesting in itself. And you brought a great deal of information to the table regarding that. So yes, so how did you figure all this out?
Yeah, and a lot of it is, how do they keep it secret from us? It's brainwashing. It's actually just old-fashioned brainwashing. You repeat the lie long enough, you say that free energy is impossible, and then people just believe it. That's sadly the conclusion that I've come to in terms of the how. Even people like Elon Musk, look at him, for example. Generally, somebody who's pretty, open-minded when it comes to suppression and control and influence in the media. He doesn't think that gravity manipulation is possible. I mean, it's almost trivial how easy it is to uncover and figure out that it's all been possible and all been figured out if you start to dig into it. And when I started to dig into it, after I investigated the MH370 videos and the missing plane and realized there's definitely a cover up and these crazy videos of these orbs circling around the plane and disappearing it,
I remember,
although initially seeming impossible, I dug into the science aspect of it. And I realized very quickly, there's a lot of literature, more than I expected, about how to make warp drives, wormholes, basically exactly what we're seeing, how to stabilize plasma, all the stuff that I've been saying. And it's all done under like Air Force research labs. Like, we're not talking random people. We're talking like literally for the military. And soon what I came to, and I did not expect any of this to be, just so the viewers understand, was that one of the first people to speak out was a guy named Bob Grenier. Low energy nuclear reactions. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? No idea, right? Turns out it's cold fusion. It's cold fusion from 1989. And I'm like, how can this is connected to cold fusion? And I had heard that the UFO topic was kind of connected to free energy, but I just kind of thought it was something people were doing to connect it. But turns out, no, they're directly connected. It turns out the suppression of cold fusion is because when we're trying to do fusion research, we've ruled out using gravity because we say we can't manipulate gravity. But the sun, when we look at the sun, we know part of why fusion's happening is gravity.
Right.
But down here, we're just trying to do it with just heat. Just heat it up really hot and just hope fusion happens. So the reason why cold fusion has to be suppressed is because cold fusion utilizes gravity, the manipulation of gravity, which is not believed to be possible. So when I pieced that together, I went, wait a minute. And everybody, the whole idea of fusion is that we can get more out in terms of the energy we put in. And a lot of people just gloss over this. I'm like, wow, are we just ignoring this? And they're like, well, we're using hydrogen and therefore, it's fine because chemistry and therefore, the chemical compounds make it work, whatever. I'm very skeptical that at the end of the day, when it works, that'll be the answer. I think we're going to end up finding out that
exactly that's the thing. But is there anybody who is working to progress and advance Tesla's vision? Is there anybody?
Yeah, I mean, there are people out there, and Bob Greenyer is one of them. And there are others as well. The other people like Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, that are working with the government, working on warp drives and stuff like this. They have a bunch of papers about extracting energy from the quantum vacuum. The problem is they're just lying publicly and saying it's not successful, or they just don't release results and stuff like that. And and here's the thing. You say, why? It's national security. This is why the UFO topic is national security. It's not because of aliens. It's absurd. And I'm not saying the aliens aren't real. Aliens are for sure real. Whether or not they're visiting us, I don't know. I don't care. The point is, if aliens were visiting us using warp drives or wormholes, they must understand something about physics that we currently publicly do not understand. And the answer of what they understand is, A, we can achieve energy efficiency probably 1 million times beyond where we're at right now, essentially free energy. That's how they're able to travel amongst the stars. That's how we will travel amongst the stars, hopefully in the near future while we're still alive. But now you keep in mind one last point. Why are they keeping that secret? I mean, how many reasons? Power, money, the end of our entire basically economic way of life. But the biggest one is that this type of power and technology, infinite energy or extreme efficiency, it allows for like black hole super weapons, I call them. Something that could easily wipe out the planet. I'm not talking like a nuke that takes out part of a city. I'm talking the whole planet gone. Maybe even the whole solar system gone. In fact, if I'm right about this, then I would argue the Fermi paradox, why we don't see aliens everywhere, is probably because a lot of them wipe themselves out once they figure out this property of the universe. That's the reason why they're hiding it.
This is some mind-blowing stuff, Ashton. I mean, I don't expect any less from you, frankly, and it's wonderful to have you with us. Why is this of such interest to you?
The reason why I care about this is because once I realize this is true, I want to live in a world where we're in Star Trek world while I'm still alive, not while I'm dead, because I realized we're standing on the shoulders of giants, engineering giants who've already figured this stuff out decades ago. Many of them just can't speak because of NDAs. So many of them, like Friedwart Winterberg, for example, I have a feeling he's probably just like a legend behind the scenes in terms of fusion research and what have you. Like if you look at his work, it's basically everything I've been saying, but just with kind of an academic slant to it. So I care because I want to vindicate those engineers who got like no credit, but I also want humanity to move forward. And I do respect the national security side of it. I do think it's ultimately going to be doomsday for us. I don't think humanity is going to make it, but I want to be proven wrong. And I don't think there's any point in drawing it out. Like, what are we waiting for? We're waiting for humans to like all of a sudden become enlightened. It ain't going to happen.
No, it isn't.
You know?
Loads of questions coming in from you. I've got to ask you this one at least. Randy said this: what's going on in CERN? I think if anybody has an answer there, it's probably you, Ashton.
CERN should have figured it out, but let me just tell you this: all these particle colliders, like the idea that they're make it bigger and bigger and bigger, is just stupid. That's completely not necessary. That's just circus and peanuts for the masses, right? Is like you get the dumb people, the public get impressed by, make this thing bigger and it's gonna be more impressive. They're almost certainly either sabotaging the research too, because they should be able to figure out like there is the ether and like no question there must be a medium that we're in. So I don't know the exact specifics, but don't trust him at all.
Let's have a look. He's watched one too many episodes of Star Trek, says Adrian. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? Is that's we're dealing with those kind of obstacles, aren't we?
Well, Star Trek is predictive programming in a way.
Right.
Almost certainly people that knew about some of this stuff were influencing the development of the show, because almost everything in Star Trek is going to end up being real. Now, it's not going to look the way that it looks in Star Trek. Everything you can see in Star Trek, including replicators, because once you start to bring in fusion, now you have transmutation. I mean, we're not going to have replicators like probably in our lifetimes, but 100 years from now, yeah, Star Trek replicators, we're going to have everything you see in there. Warp drives, wormholes, all of it. Now, it's not going to be a wormhole that opens up like in Deep Space Nine, but it's going to be like you saw in the MH370 videos, objects converging, boom. Now that object is somewhere else. Oh, one last thing I want to bring up very quickly, phase conjugation. This idea, the whole concept of manipulating gravity is based on the idea of using like radar, electromagnetic waves, and having them interfere. But first, having them 180 degrees out of phase. So imagine two waves that are perfectly opposite of one another that either balance each other out or amplify each other, you know, or when they go over one another. That's actually just the fundamental concept of what we're doing. Is everything is waves. So if you create a wave that's an equal and opposite wave, is there nothing left? No, there's not nothing left. That's the big secret. That's the problem with Maxwell's equations. If I'm going to do this last example and I'm done. It's like taking this rubber band and saying, I'm going to pull equally 1 unit on both sides and saying that there's nothing there. And then saying, okay, we'll pull equally 2 units on both sides. Nothing there. Okay, pull equally 10 units on both sides. Well, you would, classic physics way, there's nothing there. You look at it, you go, there's definitely something there. It's called stress. Stress in that rubber band. That rubber band is about to snap. The stress in space-time is gravity. That's what we're dealing with. The stress in space-time is gravity. So if you create a powerful enough electromagnetic wave, phase cancel them out, you create a scalar wave. And if you cross the streams like in Ghostbusters, you can produce or remove or take energy away at a distance. That was essentially Tesla's concept, and that's our future.
We have so many questions, but we don't have time to ask them, unfortunately. Thank you so much for being here today. I think we had to bring you back because we literally have such a pile of questions for you. There's no way we can cover them, but I really appreciate you joining us. We've also put a link in the description to your YouTube channel so people can pick up on a lot of what you've been talking about today as well and listen to it in more depth. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Ashton, really appreciate it. Everybody, Ashton Forbes. Lovely to have you with us. Take good care of yourself. Thank you. And yes, I can see all of your many questions. One I don't understand that I saw a couple of times, which was to do with direct energy weapons and 9/11. And the problem is that I literally had no idea what you were talking about there. And I saw that about a minute ago, and I suspected that would take us much further. But the thing is, I want to try and bring on somebody to talk about that, actually, about direct energy weapons. And I think Dr. Judy Wood would be great for that because I have that book as one example. But I didn't understand your point there, that you were saying that they can hack out our reality, as Ashton has shown, says We Fat Shug. Fascinating stuff. Right. Geoengineering protest, everybody. And Zoe, our mod, she captured this today. Oh, no, that's Tesla back on the screen. Where's that video? Let me try it again. Let's try it again. That looks interesting, Zoe. And so there is a geoengineering protest which is taking place on the 21st of June 2025, 2 p.m. Hyde Park in London. It's going to be hosted by Matt Landman. Matt Landman was with us on Wake Up for our Christmas special. He is hosting that event on the summer solstice, which I think is a fascinating time, frankly, to hold a geoengineering protest. And thank you as ever to our fabulous donators trying to finish the march behind the scenes this week. But if not, it will be next week. So thank you to Dinesh and Merv and Jade, Ian, Philip. And I'm now on Bluesky. I'm trying to move away from X. I absolutely hate it. If you're on Bluesky, follow me, please, at soniapoulton.bsky.social. And thank you to Crazy Bunny for single-handedly holding down the modding as Ashton is gigging. Hope she's having a great time. And we're looking to expand our modding team. So if you're interested, let me know at soniapoulton@sky.com. If we get enough people, we can have perhaps people working on rotation. And it would actually give our mods a chance to actually take part in commenting rather than constantly modding. And but I just want them to know that I do truly appreciate them. And before we go, when I was growing up, I was a big fan of Aesop's Fables. I don't know about you. Aesop's Fables, like fairy tales, but they don't often refer to princes or princesses. They're a collection of short stories, often featuring animals that impart moral lessons and have been told and retold for centuries. And today, 26th of March, is the anniversary of the first printed version of Aesop's Fables into English in 1484. And these fables are as relevant today as they were. I mean, they're as relevant in the 21st century as they are in the 15th century. And so much that Aesop said resonates so loud and so clearly. One of Aesop's very famous quotes was, "Those who voluntarily put power into the hands of a tyrant must not wonder if it be at last turned against themselves." And that is relevant for voters, how people vote for, the least bad option. And Aesop also said, "It is easy to be brave from a safe distance." And when I heard that, I always think about kind of like online trolls and people who hide behind anonymous avatars and social media loudmouths who do a lot of this online, but not in reality. But I wanted to kind of reflect on some of the Aesop's Fables because I think they're lovely. I love, obviously, the tortoise and the hare. It's very famous. It teaches us the importance of perseverance and about the idea that slow and steady wins the race, because the hare and the tortoise were having a race. And of course, when you put them side by side, there should be no logical match between them. But because the hare became arrogant and decided to take a snooze, the tortoise won. So it was this whole idea that even if you are the fastest, you won't necessarily win the race. And also the Lion and the Mouse, I love that one. That highlights the importance of kindness, and that even the smallest creature can repay a kindness. And that's of a mouse coming across a lion and the lion letting the mouse go, and then the lion being trapped and the mouse being able to gnaw through the trap and free the lion. And I think all of those things are really relevant and really worthy, and in part sometimes a lot better than fairy tales. So I really love Aesop's Fables. And actually, I remember when my brother got married, actually his first marriage, he's married a second time now, a very long time, but it was when I was about 11 years old, and my brother and his wife, they brought me back a collection of Aesop tales from their honeymoon. And now I realize why, because I was a bit wild even at 11 years old, and they were obviously trying to show me some kind of like moral direction through these fables. But I want to recount my favorite one. My favorite one is about the North Wind and the Sun, and I'm sure many of you are aware of it. And it's about a competition between the North Wind and the Sun to decide which one is the strongest. Well, on the face of it, right, the challenge, so the idea was that the challenge was to make a passing traveler remove his cloak, right? And on the face of it, you'd think, well, that probably the North Wind would be able to do that. It'd be able to literally blow the cloak off. But what happened, as the North Wind blew, the traveller wrapped the coat tighter and tighter around himself. But when the sun shone, the traveller was overcome with heat and soon took his cloak off. And kind of like the moral of the story there is that honey is better than vinegar. That the power of persuasion is far stronger oftentimes than force. And so I love that idea, because we're often taught in this world that it's kind of like bigger, better and bruiser and all that kind of stuff. But I do believe in the power of kind of like the right kind of persuasion. I did have a comment about this on social media. I think it was yesterday. And that was, I've kind of given up persuading people to see my point of view for years. think it's actually quite a childish idea, this whole idea that we want other people to share our point of view, whereas now I just say my thing and that's that. But I do love that, the moral of that tale. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I think it's a wonderful way to celebrate a wonderful writer. And so just to say, I'll see you on Friday when I will be covering Rainer Fulmich, who's in jail. Obviously, I'm going to be joined by two people who know him well and know what's going on. I'll also be joined by a gentleman who was interested in standing for reform. There were problems there. And we'll also be talking about star children. And are you one? So I just want to say to you, thank you very much for being here today. We've got nearly 2,000 watching on YouTube, which is fantastic. 1,951. That is absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you all being here. And I always appreciate you. And I appreciate you on the live chat. I appreciate you watching back and commenting, and wherever you are watching and supporting, like, share, subscribe. We really appreciate you very, very much. And I'm going to do what I always do around here, and that is I'm going to finish today's show on a quote. And this is an Aesop quote, and it's gratitude is the sign of noble souls. Let that sink in. Have a fantastic Thursday. I will see you Friday morning. Take excellent care of yourself, everybody. See you Friday. Thank you, Crazy Bunny. You did a terrific job as per. Lots of love to you all, everybody. Take care.